Chapter 1. The Smith of Barrowfen. Sir Aldrich Halvan had seen enough death to last several lifetimes. He'd hung up his shield after the War of Ashen Banners, retired to a thatch-roof smithy on the marsh edge of Barrowfen, and taught his hands to make hinges and horseshoes instead of spearheads. Still, on windless nights he heard the screams, the crack of burning ladders, the dull knock of bodies against palisade. He'd learned to sleep with the door barred and a blade inside the hearthstones where no one would think to look. The morning the star casket arrived, frost feathered the window lattice. Aldrich was rasping a tang when a black lacquered cart rolled through the reed mist, drawn by oxen that didn't snort or blink. The driver wore no face, only a visor polished like onyx. He left a long, hexagonal chest on the anvil and unrolled a parchment sealed with green wax. The sigil was one Aldrich knew from war, the unifier crown of King Narration, dead these 3 winters, laid in basalt under 7 bells of iron. By testament, the driver intoned, voice hollow as a censer. The star casket is bequeathed to Aldrich Halvan, once captain of the 3rd Squires. A scrawl at the bottom, Thoraine's clawed hand, and a last line inked in an unfamiliar script that shimmered violet where it dried, guard the witness. Aldrich signed because there was nothing else to do. The cart rattled away, hooves making no prints. When the chest side open, cold spilled over his boots like river water. Inside lay a creature that tangled scents, woven in silhouette, shoulders to a man's thigh, pelt a shifting oil sheen of midnight purples and bruised blues. 6 eyes in 2 gentle rows opened as if from a very old dream. It stretched, and its claws sang against the chest star metal like crystal knives. "You are Aldrich Halvan," it said. The voice was not a growl but a many-tuned instrument, half bell, half wind through reeds. Aldrich's hand found the knife under the hearthstone before his mind allowed the movement. "And you," he said, blade held low, "are a dream that forgot to end at dawn." "Not a dream," the creature replied. "I am Ravel. I was companion to King Narration for 73 of your years. He left me to you because you did a thing in the war that changed his measure of your kind." Aldrich frowned. He remembered a breach in a snowstorm, a smoke-blackened boy in enemy colors, the choice to cut him down or carry him through the gap. "I saved a squire. You saved a son," Ravel said softly. "And you did not ask his crest first." Chapter 2. The Wolf That Remembers. Ravel hopped lightly from the chest, leaving no scuff on the smithy floor. Up close, Aldrich saw fine geometry plated beneath the pelt, hexes like frost on iron. Each of the 6 eyes held a different hue, top pair storm gray, middle pair candle gold, bottom pair amethyst as a bishop's ring. The tail curved like a question mark, the tip glassy and faceted. "I have watched much," the wolf said, nose lifting to the smithy's low smoke. "My makers walked among the first fires. We were fashioned to be witness, keepers of concord and fault." Aldrich eased the knife back to the stone. "Witnesses to what? Hammers and harvests?" "To ascent and fall," Ravel said. "To the way your kind refuses to stay in the shape the world gives you. Narration valued that, feared it, too. He trusted me to tell you this. He was poisoned. The one who wears his crown now, Lord Krivak, does not want treaties inked in peacetime. He wants endings inked in blood." Aldrich laughed without mirth. "The war ended with bells and barley bread. I stood in the Hall of 7 and watched the banners come down. You say it was theater? Treaty on paper, conspiracy under stone," Ravel replied. "Krivak breeds a plague for men alone, spindled from comet glass. He stirs the deep cold beneath our sky and calls a false star to fall where he wills. You know the word pest. You do not know star rot." The smithy seemed to shrink. Aldrich's world had become small by choice, an anvil, a cot, 2 fields of winter kale. He had made a vow never to be a captain again. Yet the muscles in his shoulders answered an old drum. "Why me?" "Because you broke a cycle," Ravel said. "Mercy when vengeance would have been easier. My kind records such eddies in the current. Narration called it a hinge. He thought you might be a second hinge." Aldrich turned to the door, where the day had brightened to the pale silver of cold. Past the reeds, Barrowfen's chapel bell tolled terse. "If I say no, then I go to someone crueler, quicker," Ravel said, "and your village will learn the taste of purple frost." Chapter 3: A Village of Quiet Eyes. Barrowfen had learned to endure. Houses stood on stump pilings with stairs that could be hauled up when the river ran too high. Nets hung like prayer flags, salted fish drying beside charms of braided reed. Children wore copper pins against marsh fever. Old women knotted blue wrist cords to prove they remembered their names. Aldrich walked its boardwalks with Ravel padding silent behind, and saw how people made room the way water makes room, parting and returning, eyes lowered, the shape of fear learned from armies and taxes. At the chapel, Priestess Lisbeth Smudge stood in a circle, blessing a damp-lunged baby. Her hair was white as hoarfrost, though she was not yet old. The war had taken her husband, left a sermon in her voice that could cut rope. "Sir Halvin," she said, seeing him, "you keep wild company." Aldrich bowed. "A legacy from the king? The dead one or the living?" Lisbeth's mouth twitched. She glanced at Ravel. Her gaze did not flinch. "Do you eat hens?" "I eat comet light and old music," Ravel answered. "Your hens are safe. Then Barrowfen will tolerate you. We have use for things that watch." Lisbeth dipped her thumb in ash and touched Aldrich's brow. "You look like the hour before a storm." "Krivak plots a pestilence," Aldrich said. "The kind this world hasn't named." Lisbeth's hand stilled. The chapel's bell rope creaked in a wind that hadn't moved. "There's been a rumor in the grain caravan from White Cause, fields blighted overnight, not with fungus but something that froze and burned and sang." Men's hands cracked purple. The women were spared. "Star rot," Ravel murmured. "A proving of the weapon." Aldrich felt the hinge turn. "I need letters and names," he said. "Who still holds sway beyond Krivak's reach?" "Lady Mara of Kestrel-Tor," Lisbeth said without pause. "And your old bannermate Tamsin the Bold, who swore off kings and kept her oath. Both hate Krivak more than you hate stale beer." Ravel's 6 eyes brightened. "Then we go to the Tor." Chapter 4: The Road of Broken Shields. They left before Vespers, when the river turned the color of pewter, and the reed beds clicked like bones. Aldrich wore a brigandine he'd sworn never to lace again, its copper studs dulled by years on a peg. He set a traveler's pack over one shoulder, stuffed with oatcakes, boiled leather, and a whetstone smooth as a saint's knuckle. Ravel trotted at heel, crossing mud without sinking, throwing moth-like reflections on puddles where the sky hadn't decided to frost. They took the Pilgrim's Dyke north, through willows black against a pearl horizon. At dusk, they reached the Mill of 3 Stones, where the road narrowed between standing menhirs carved with eyes. A band of outlaws emerged from the shadow of the mill wheel, 5, then 7, then more, ragscarves up, knives out. Their captain wore a breastplate looted from some unlucky levy, crest chiseled off and filled with pitch. "We told the road," he said, smiling with a mouth like a cracked cup. "Coin or blood, Smith?" Aldrich measured distances, wind, the weight of his pack. In the old days he would have ordered a shield wall, feigned retreat, baited them into the menhir's blind side. Now he had one blade and a companion who claimed to eat old music. Ravel stepped forward. "Gentlemen," the wolf said, "lay down your knives and keep your fingers. Keep your knives and lose your fingers. Third option, flee and tell your grandchildren you survived a story." The captain laughed. "It talks. It bites," Ravel corrected. "But only after it sings." The wolf opened his mouth, not wide, not even menacing, and a note poured out as smooth as oil, as cold as iron dipped in snow. The menhir eyes trembled. Purple frost crawled the knife blades like light in quicksilver. The outlaws hissed as metal burned their palms, knives clattered, steaming. Aldrich moved then, swift as hunger. He caught the captain's wrist, twisted, and rapped the pommel of his knife against temple. 2 more lunged. He knocked one's elbow sideways and plucked the other's blade from the air when it slipped from purple fingers. The rest ran, shouting about demons and frozen saints. Ravel stopped singing. The frost withdrew into the knife edges like breath into lungs. He looked almost apologetic. Star rot taints small. It hurts steel and those who hold it. A warning, not a killing. Aldrich stared. You could have ended them all. Ravel's bottom eyes blinked, amethyst sorrow. Witness, not executioner. Chapter 5, Kestrel Tor. Kestrel Tor rose from the heather like a spear thrust from the earth, its curtain wall clamped to the cliff where the storm-ward sea ground itself to foam. Mara held court in the wind, hair braided with iron thread, a falcon asleep on her fist even as the gale tried to steal it. She was the kind of beautiful that makes poets waste ink, not the soft kind, but the kind you cut your palm on when you try to carry it. Tidings, she said, not wasting courtesy. The last time I saw you, Aldrich, you were vowing never again to hang your life on a tyrant's whim. I did, Aldrich said. And here I am, asking you to hang yours on mine. He told her of the casket, the bequests, the poison in a king's wine, the weapon brewing in cold caves under Krivak's seal. Ravel watched gulls with two of his eyes and Mara's face with the other four. When Aldrich finished, Mara's jaw flexed. Krivak has emptied my granaries twice on the king's name and called it tax, though the king lies 3 winters dead. He presses my vassals to swear anew. I have been considering which tower to blow first. None, Ravel said mildly. You will not win against plague and falling stars with stones. Mara's eyes sharpened. And you are? Ravel, Aldrich said. Witness to kings and mistakes. Witness, then, to my terms, Mara said. I will lend you 30 riders and letters with my seal. I will open my vault for iron and pitch. But I do nothing in your name, I do it in mine. Krivak will not be toppled by whispers. He must be seen. Aldrich nodded. We intend to pull his veil. Good, Mara said. She flicked her wrist. The falcon unfolded like a steel fan and leapt into the wind. Because while you were walking my cliffs, a second star fell inland. The messenger I sent never returned. Ravel's hackles pricked, each hair catching the dusk like wires. We go at dawn, he said. Chapter 6, The Fallen Star. They found the crater 2 days inland, beyond barley that had turned strange. Stalks bowed under a glittering rime that never melted, even in full noon. The hole itself was a chalice scooped from earth, edges glassed. At the bottom, half buried like a tooth, lay a shard of something darker than night, a wedge of star with a faint, constant hum. Around the lip stood men in Krivak's blackthorn livery. They had built scaffolds and a winch. Some wore gloves of boiled leather, others had wrapped their hands in damp linen. None sang, yet their teeth chattered. A captain barked orders as if shouting might thaw courage. Aldrich counted. 20, he murmured. 18, Ravel corrected. And 2 who want to be somewhere else. Before tactics could settle, a child's cry knifed the air, from the far side of the scaffolds, where a village lane cut through hedges. A girl of 8 stood frozen mid-run, feet rooted to purpled dirt, fingers locked on a wooden doll. Frost climbed her calves like ivy. Aldrich didn't ask permission. He slid down the berm, let momentum carry him into the first guard with shoulder low, hip turned. The man toppled into 2 more. Aldrich took the captain's breath with an elbow and the next man's courage by stealing his blade with the trick he'd used at the menhirs. Ravel's song rolled across the pit, a lower register now, curling around steel like smoke around a candle. Metal shrieked, blued, and then went lifeless in hands that suddenly couldn't remember how to grip. Aldrich reached the girl. He took her under the arms and heaved, but her feet were truly rooted. Ravel vaulted the scaffold, landed beside them, and touched the purple crust with one glassy claw. Tell the earth a story, he breathed, and the frost sighed away as if embarrassed to have been seen. The girl stumbled into Aldrich's breastplate, sobbing with a child's complete relief. Her mother charged from the lane and clutched them both, babbling blessings to saints Aldrich didn't know and promising to light candles she couldn't afford. By the time Aldrich looked up, the blackthorns were in full rout, half-dropping shields, half-dropping dignities. Ravel stared at the wedge of star. They were drawing it out. taking it to the coal house. Where? The old salt mine under Krivak's Hill, Ravel said. He will nest them there until he has a choir of stones. Chapter 7. Tamsin of the Knocking Oath. Tamsin met them at dusk under a gallows tree where no rope had swung in a decade. She had the same laugh she'd had in the campaign, the blade's-edge kind that turned fear into momentum. But now it lived next door to lines around her eyes that said she'd learned the price of laughter. She wore mail as if it were a shirt and a red scarf as if the wind were a stagehand. You bring a hound from heaven, she said, peering at Ravel. And a cause I swore to leave to fools. You swore off kings, Aldrich said. Not people. Tamsin chewed that like gristle. What's the favor? We plan to show Krivak's rot to the realm, Aldrich said. We need someone who can get into the coal house and out again with a story. Tamsin spat into the dust. I can do in and out. I can do story. I can't do alive if it's more guarded than a virgin in a ballad. It is, Ravel said. But the guards believe false things. They think Starrot cannot climb a ladder. They think iron is a prayer. Tamsin's grin cut her face in half. Then we'll teach them to doubt. Chapter 8. Beneath the Hill. The coal house opened like a swallowed secret behind Krivak's keep, iron bars banding an old mine mouth. Tamsin went first, oiled black as a beetle, twin knives strapped to forearms. Aldrich followed with a coil of silk rope, Ravel last because he was lightest on the world. His paws barely stirred the old dust. Inside, the temperature dropped from autumn to never, breath puffing into quick ghosts. Star wedges sat in cradles of oak and iron, each humming a different note. The sound made Aldrich's molars ache. Men moved among them with catalogues and tongs. They wore amulets of hammered pewter shaped like eyes. Tamsin signed, 2 fingers left. A patrol. Aldrich ducked behind a stack of salt barrels. Ravel flattened like poured mercury, becoming shadow where no shadow should fit. The patrol paused by a wedge and spoke in the half-chant of men repeating orders they don't understand. Test on the western hamlets, men only, confirmation sent to his lordship. Aldrich's fist curled until studs bit palm. Tamsin's hand touched his wrist. Patience, the squeeze said. Kill the right thing. They slid deeper. At the far end of the gallery, a stair cut the rock. The hum grew higher, almost sweet. In a chamber ringed with silver mirrors stood a cradle larger than a wine press. Inside, like a heart waiting for a chest, a star wedge as big as a cow. Runes crawled its surface, violet, living. A figure in blackthorn half-plate leaned on the railing, speaking to a scribe. Unveil at the Feast of Unities, the figure said. Let them toast peace under a sky we own. Tamsin's mouth shaped 2 words, Lord Krivak. Ravel's ears went flat. We cannot take him here, he whispered, every voice in him a harp string tuned to warning. He will shatter the wedge and drown us all in purple winter. Then we take his voice. Tamsin breathed. She pointed at the scribe's desk, wax tablets, seals, a crystal tube. Proof. Chapter 9. The Theft of a Voice. They waited for the shift bell. When it rang, iron on iron, the miners and guards flowed like a tide to the stair. Tamsin slid to the desk and plucked the crystal tube. Ravel exhaled on it, and the violet script inside glowed brighter. Aldrich took the wax tablet and the seal, a star with 3 eyes, and pressed both into his cuirass lining. They moved backward against the stream, bodies a myth of absence. Then a boy looked up. He couldn't have been more than 14, freckles spattered like ground cinnamon. His eyes widened at the wolf, and his mouth began to open around a future shout. Aldrich saw the life ahead of that boy, 1,000 harvests, a sister's wedding, the shock of his first bee sting after 30. He did not want to cut that rope. Ravel stepped close. You saw a stray dog, he murmured, and the boy's pupils dilated as if a dusk had deepened inside them. You saw a dog and you kicked it and it ran and you forgot it. Do you understand? The boy blinked. Dog, he said, voice dreamy. Ran. Good lad, Tamsin said, and flicked him under the chin to give the memory an anchor. They were almost clear when a horn blew sharp as a snapped bone. The gallery lurched into chaos. Krivak's half-plate figure reappeared, eyes searching the dark like knives that wanted nicks. "Seal the mouth," he shouted. "Count the wedges. Someone's been here." Tamsin didn't so much run as unspool. Aldrich matched her, boots silent by force of habit, older than most of his scars. Ravel veered left, down a side adit no human would have seen. They burst into night not through the main bars but through a fissure hidden by nettles, breath pluming hard, hearts thudding that particular rhythm of a theft that worked. Chapter 10. A Banner of Proof. Mara received them in her chapel hall, where saints with broken noses looked down like tired cousins. Lisbeth stood beside her, hands inked from transcribing the crystal script. Tamsin paced like a caged kite. Ravel lay with chin on paws, 6 eyes at 6 different distances. Lisbeth finished the last line and blew on it. "It's all here," she said. "Dates, tests, orders. Proof Krivak plans to unveil a controllable starfall at the Feast of Unities. Proof of plague trials on hamlets west of Wycause. Names of apothecaries. Names of priests." "Priests?" Aldrich said, stomach turning. "Some can be bought," Lisbeth said wearily. "Faith doesn't fix hunger." Mara's mouth hardened. "We make this public." "Not just public," Ravel said. "Spectacle. You must make their skin feel the lie. Humans are good with words. They are better with seeing." Tamsin's grin came back, wolfish in the torchlight. "Then we make a theater Krivak can't close. The feast is in 12 days. He gathers the realm to watch him cheat a star. We'll let the stars sing a different song." Chapter 11. The Feast of Unities. Feast day dawned with banners everywhere, crests like summer fruit, berries, suns, boars, wheels. The square before the Hall of Seven jammed with gentry smelling of nutmeg and sweat. On a dais, Krivak stood in lacquered black, a crown like knotted bramble weighing his brow. Behind him, an apparatus of mirrors and polished stone had been assembled, and under its arch a cloth-shrouded mass hummed in a key the teeth hated. Aldrich positioned Mara's riders in the crowd, here by the cider barrels, there in the minstrel's shade. Tamsin slunk beneath the dais with 2 coils of silk rope and a grin. Lisbeth and a chorus of village women took the chapel steps with sheets of copied script, hands ready to throw them like snow. Ravel climbed the bell tower as if gravity were a suggestion. Krivak raised both hands. "People of the realm!" he cried, and the crowd melted into silence. "See the peace I keep. See the star that bends." He gestured. The cloth was pulled. Gasps rippled like wind across rye. The wedge sat black singing in its cradle. Mirrors aimed its hum at the square until the banners shivered. "No," Ravel whispered. From the bell tower, a note poured like river light, braided with the wedge's hum. It found the mirrors and bent them back, not at the star, but at the parchments Lisbeth flung. Purple light etched script into flame, words burned on the air where every eye could read them, tested on men of white cause. Plague for males. Unveil at feast. Credit to Lord Krivak of the Blackthorn. Each line hung incandescent, undeniable. The square hiccuped between awe and rage. Krivak shouted to cut the spell. He lurched for the wedge lever. Tamsin's rope flicked. It looped his wrist. She yanked. Krivak stumbled, and the wedge shuddered in its cradle. "Aldrich!" Ravel's shout cracked the tower's pigeons from their roost. Aldrich moved. He didn't think about vows or marshes or the comfort of making hinges. He thought about a boy with cinnamon freckles and a girl rooted in purple frost. About people, not kings. He leapt the dais stairs as Krivak tore free and slapped his palm to the wedge's sigil. The hum went wild, a storm finding mountains. Aldrich put his hand over Krivak's. Skin met sigil. Pain slammed him like a falling gate. For a heartbeat he saw a winter that would never end and his own bones strung with glass. Then Ravel's voice, 6 voices, threaded into his marrow and sang counter. Not ending but turning. Not plague but witness. The wedge blinked. The hum collapsed into a single, clean bell tone that tolled through the square and up into the sky where clouds listened. Mirrors cracked. Purple frost blew away like thistledown. Krivak dropped to his knees, eyes white. Chapter 12. The hinge turns. Silence fell. The deep kind that feels like someone holding breath for a world. Then the square erupted, shouts, sobs, the scrape of swords being drawn and then, uncertain, sheathed. Mara stepped onto the dais with the confidence of a knife that knows it's sharp. By witness of the realm, she said, voice cutting through the storm, I name Lord Krivak traitor to peace and murderer by artifice. Blackthorn guards hesitated. Some looked at the burning words still hanging in the air. Some looked at their hands and imagined purple cracks. One by one, they lowered spears. Krivak tried to stand. Tamsin's knee met his breastplate with conversational familiarity. Stay, she advised. Lisbeth raised the parchment and her chin. We are not finished with kings, she said, but we are finished with this one's lies. Aldrich's burned palm throbbed in time with the bell that was not ringing anymore. Ravel pressed his head against the knight's hip, a weight like trust. You sang back, the wolf murmured, pride warm as soup. I remembered a tune, Aldrich said hoarsely. From the edge of the square, the little girl he'd lifted from the starfrost waved, doll held high. Her mother wept frankly into her own hands. Somewhere, a falcon cried and the wind changed, as if the city had opened a window. Mara looked at Aldrich, then at the crowd, then at the cracked apparatus that had almost recast the sky. There will be reckonings, she said. Trials. We will not replace one tyrant with another. We will write laws that remember frost. Ravel's 6 eyes held 6 futures and tried to choose one. You are on a hinge again, he told Aldrich softly. If you wish, you can go back to your marsh and your iron. But know this, the star has learned a new song because a man with a scar on his palm believed in counter notes. Aldrich stared at his hand, at the angry violet lines that would never fade. He thought of barley and bells, of hammers and laughter, of a wolf that ate old music. He smiled a tired, dangerous smile, the kind that makes enemy commanders nervous and friends breathe easier. Smiths build more than hinges, he said. They build doors. Let's make sure the next ones open the right way. Chapter 13. The Crown of Ashes. The hall that had once echoed with oaths now smelled of parchment, ink, and blood forgotten by morning light. Lord Krivak sat chained in the center, wrists blistered where the violet rot had touched him. His eyes, once black as obsidian, had turned cloudy, like river stones washed too long. The tribunal gathered in silence. Lady Mara presided beside Priestess Lisbeth, her falcon perched upon the back of her chair. Tamsin leaned on her sword like it was the only thing still keeping her tethered to the earth. Aldrich stood behind Ravel, whose crystalline fur shimmered with a faint, soft glow. Krivak's lips twitched into a smirk. You think yourself saviors? He rasped. You opened the star's throat and lived by accident. The heavens will remember what you've done, and punish you for it. Ravel's 6 eyes flickered as if considering whether to answer with words or truth. You misunderstand the heavens, Krivak, he said, voice calm as winter's first snow. They do not punish. They witness. Mara struck the gavel. Lord Krivak of the Blackthorn, you stand accused of treason against the crown and the gods, of waging war against mankind through forbidden stars, and of murdering your sovereign, King Thrain. Krivak's laughter came like the crack of dry wood. Thrain was a fool who knelt to humans. I brought strength. I would have made our kind eternal. You would have made ashes eternal, Lisbeth said coldly. The gavel fell again. Sentence is passed, Mara said. The condemned shall be buried beneath the coal house, his name struck from all records. His lands will be given to the widows of White Cause and his gold melted to mint tools, not crowns. Aldrich watched as the guards dragged Krivak away. He didn't cheer. He didn't speak. Only when the doors boomed shut did he whisper. It never ends, does it? Ravel turned to him, tail curling like a question. Endings are human inventions, he said. The world prefers circles. Chapter 14. The Song Beneath the Stones. Barrowfen's marsh thawed earlier that spring. The air smelled of wet earth and cold iron, and frogs returned to their slow, rumbling songs. Aldrich had reopened his forge, not for war, but for building. Farmers brought plowshares, children brought broken toys, and the hammer's rhythm filled the days with peace that felt almost foreign. Yet beneath the calm, something lingered. Ravel had grown quieter since the trial. His glow dimmed each night, and sometimes Aldrich caught him staring north, toward the hill where the cold house slept. One evening, as stars cracked open above the reeds, Aldrich found the wolf outside, paws sunk in shallow water that reflected 6 moons instead of 1. "What's calling you?" Aldrich asked. "The song," Ravel said simply. "The star's hum is fading wrong. It should have gone silent. Instead it grows." Aldrich frowned. "You said Krivak's power was broken." "I said his body was," Ravel replied. "But power is like music, it echoes." The marsh wind shifted, carrying a low, distant note that vibrated the inside of Aldrich's teeth. It was faint, but it pulsed like a heartbeat. "Is it another wedge?" Aldrich asked. "No," Ravel said, eyes narrowing. "Something older. The stars are remembering themselves." Chapter 15. The Gathering Storm. They left Barrowfen before dawn, traveling light and fast. Mara met them at the northern gate, armor dulled by ash, hair unbraided. "I felt it too," she said before Aldrich could speak. "My falcons have flown north and not returned. The sky smells wrong." Tamsin joined them halfway through the ride, leading 20 riders who wore no sigil save for a knot of crimson thread. "You can't keep me from another disaster," she said, grinning as she handed Aldrich a spare blade. "Besides, someone's got to make sure you die poetically." The journey to the coal house took 2 days. The valley was silent, too silent. Birds didn't sing, and the wind refused to cross its mouth. When they reached the entrance, Aldrich saw Frost again, creeping out like the fingers of something waking from sleep. Ravel's fur rose along his spine. "The wedge you stopped wasn't destroyed," he said. "You turned its hunger inward, but hunger unspent becomes something worse." They descended into the dark. The air was colder than before, colder than truth. The miners' tools lay where they'd been dropped, half buried in a sheen of violet ice. The great cradle stood empty. The wedge was gone. Tamsin swore under her breath. "Someone took it." "No," Ravel said, voice barely audible. "It walked." Chapter 16. The Beast of Starlight. At first, they thought it thundered. The sound rolled through the caverns like a forged bellows. Then the light came, a deep, trembling indigo, bleeding from cracks in the rock. The frost along the walls began to move, slithering upward as if climbing toward air. "It's alive," Mara breathed. The frost coalesced into shape, limbs, ribs, the outline of something immense. The wedge had birthed a form, a star beast of ice and mirror, eyes glowing with the stolen knowledge of a dead king. It moved like a glacier that had learned malice. Ravel stepped forward. "It knows me. You can talk to it?" Aldrich shouted over the roar. "I can try." The wolf's crystalline claws struck the floor, and his fur flared white. 6 eyes burned with ancestral memory as he sang, not words, but resonance. The star beast slowed, the air between them vibrating like the space between plucked strings. Then it answered. The note that came back wasn't harmony, it was grief. Ravel's body convulsed. "It remembers everything," he gasped. "Every war. Every death. Every scream ever carved into the sky." "Can you stop it?" Mara demanded. "I can only show it peace," Ravel said, "if I still believe in it." Aldrich tightened his grip on his sword. "Then we'll help it remember." Chapter 17. The Light That Fights. The battle in the coal house was not fought with steel alone. Every strike rang like thunder and echoed for miles, but every heartbeat, every cry carried an answer from the stars. Aldrich's sword flared when Ravel's voice touched it. Mara's falcon dove through columns of frost like a comet. Tamsin laughed even as shards sliced her cheek open. The beast lashed out with waves of crystal fire that froze air itself. Ravel countered each burst with song, shaping the frost into petals that dissolved before they hit the ground. Then the creature spoke, not in language, but through memory. Aldrich saw flashes, cities turned to glass, ships burning in void, children frozen mid-step. It showed him the history of 1,000 worlds devoured by ambition. He shouted back through the noise, "We're not like them!" The light hesitated. Ravel seized the pause, his song turning softer, slower. "We learn," he said aloud. "We change. The others broke because they forgot how to love." The beast trembled. For a moment it shrank, its glow folding inward like a dying star. Aldrich reached out, ignoring the burn. "Rest," he whispered. "You've seen enough." With a sound like a sigh across galaxies, the creature dimmed. The frost melted into water. The cavern walls wept. Ravel staggered and fell. Chapter 18: The Last Witness. They carried Ravel out under dawn's pale light. His body flickered between forms: wolf, starlight, shadow, and finally settled into something small enough to fit in Aldrich's arms. "Did we win?" Tamsin asked, her face streaked with soot and tears. "No one wins against memory," Ravel murmured. His voice was faint, layered with echoes. "But you sang well, humans. You reminded the stars that mercy still exists." Aldrich knelt beside him. "You're not dying. Not like this." Ravel smiled, or did something like it. "Witnesses don't die. We pass the seeing on." He reached a paw to Aldrich's burned hand. The violet scar pulsed once, twice. "You'll know when to use it." "Use it for what?" Aldrich asked. Ravel's eyes, 6, dimming, blinked slowly. "For remembering when everyone else forgets." And then he was gone. Not in death, but in dispersion, the body unraveling into threads of light that rose and vanished into the morning clouds. Chapter 19: The Forge of Heaven. Aldrich rebuilt the forge again that summer, this time atop the ruins of the coal house. Each strike of his hammer echoed like a prayer, ringing through halls that had once held terror. Mara visited often, bringing supplies and scrolls, her hair now streaked with silver. Lisbeth brought pilgrims who wanted to see where the star Mercy was sung. Tamsin vanished for months at a time, returning with stories of villages uniting and borders fading. She never said it aloud, but everyone knew her red thread had become a symbol, a quiet rebellion of compassion over conquest. One evening, as Aldrich quenched a blade, the violet scar on his palm flickered. He looked to the horizon. A faint shimmer hung in the sky where no sun had set. Ravel's voice, faint, distant, but smiling, whispered through the wind. "Still building, Aldrich?" He chuckled. "Always." "Good," said the voice. "Keep singing." Chapter 20: The Legacy of the Wolf. Years turned like pages. Children were told of the wolf who sang the stars asleep, and of the smith who taught heaven to listen. Mara became queen not by conquest but by consent. Lisbeth's order spread through the marshlands, teaching that mercy was the only coin worth hoarding. And in the forge above the coal house, a hammer still rang. Its rhythm was steady, its music endless, a heartbeat made of iron and memory. When storms rolled in, the villagers swore they heard a second rhythm beside it, soft, echoing, like padded paws walking across the roof of the world. The world called it legend. Aldrich called it friendship. End of Book 1. The Wolf That Remembered. Chapter 21: The Forgotten Kingdom. 2 centuries had passed since the Wolf of Starlight vanished into dawn. The world had changed. The kingdom of Kestrel Tor had become legend itself, its walls moss-eaten, its banners faded to ghosts. Yet from the ashes of that peace, a dozen petty crowns had risen, each claiming descent from the same bloodline, each wielding half-truths as weapons. But in the shadowed valleys where the marsh met the highlands, there still stood the Forge of Heaven. Smoke rose from it once more. Aldrich's line had not died. The forge was tended now by Ira Halvin, the smith's great-granddaughter, tall, auburn-haired, eyes the grey-blue of tempered steel. She'd inherited his scar, The same faint violet mark curled across her palm like lightning frozen mid-strike. The villagers said she could hear metal sing before it cracked. They also said she dreamed in colors no mortal tongue could name. Ira never denied it. Each night she felt the hum beneath her workshop floor, the faint pulse of something sleeping in the old coal house caverns below. It was weaker than the stories said, but it was there. A heart that refused to stop beating. And on the night the first red comet in centuries tore across the sky, the hum changed pitch. Chapter 22: The Stranger in the Rain. The storm came like a punishment. Lightning split the sky into jagged glass, and the rain fell in sheets so heavy that Ira's forge fire sputtered. She was hammering out the last shape of a plowed blade when she saw movement beyond the open doorway. Something stumbling through the mud, dragging light with it. She reached for her father's old sword, rusted but serviceable. "Stay back," she called. "You'll find no shelter here if you mean trouble." The figure raised a hand, palm glowing faintly blue. "I mean no harm. I seek the smith of Heaven's forge." Ira frowned. "That name's not spoken anymore. Who asks it?" The stranger stepped into the light. He was young, or seemed so, but his armor was older than any she'd seen, etched with sigils that shimmered faintly like starlight through water. His eyes were luminous silver, his cloak burned at the edges. "My name is Cale Doraine," he said. "I come from the north, from ruins where frost burns red. And I bring warning, the stars are waking again." The name hit Ira like a hammer to the chest. "Doraine?" she said. "As in King Doraine the Unifier?" "I am his blood," Cale replied grimly. "And I bear his curse." He unwrapped his forearm. Beneath the skin, faint veins of violet light pulsed like molten metal. Ira's own scar throbbed in answer. Chapter 23: The Song Beneath the Forge. That night, the forge burned with two flames, one gold, one blue. Rain hissed against the roof, but the air inside was dry and charged with tension. Ira poured Cale a cup of elder mead and set it beside the coals. "You said the stars are waking. Tell me what that means before I regret letting you in." Cale stared into the fire. "Do you know what your ancestor did?" "I know he stopped the star plague," she said. "I know he forged peace." He nodded. "He did. But peace built on silence cannot last. The stars remember his voice, the one who sang them still. And now, something in the void has begun to sing back." Ira leaned forward. "You've seen it?" Cale's jaw tightened. "I've heard it. In dreams. In frost. Entire villages in the north frozen in their sleep, eyes open, mouths humming. It calls itself the Choir of Ember." The forge light flickered violet. Ira's scar burned hotter than it had in her life. Beneath the floor, she felt the pulse again, stronger now, closer. Something was stirring in the coal house. Chapter 24: The Awakening of Ravel. At midnight the hum became a voice. It came not from the walls, nor from the ground, but from within Ira herself, a vibration that spoke without words, warm and ancient. "Ira Halvin, blood of the hinge, keeper of the flame." She staggered, clutching her palm. Cale reached for her, but the air around her shimmered like heat haze. The violet mark erupted in light. Threads of energy spun out, swirling into a shape, a familiar one. The wolf stood there again. Crystalline fur, 6 glowing eyes, tail like glass and smoke. Ravel. But he was changed. His form flickered, translucent at the edges, as though he existed between worlds. "You're..." Ira gasped. "Not gone," Ravel finished, smiling faintly. "Merely waiting. The song has begun again sooner than I hoped." Cale's hand went to his sword. "You're the one from the legends. And you are the one from the curse," Ravel said, gaze steady. "Thoraine's blood carries the echo of his final wish, to keep the stars asleep. But something has broken the lullaby." Ira's eyes widened. "The Choir of Ember." Ravel nodded. "Yes. Fragments of the old plague. Voices of the dying, fused into one will. They seek warmth now, fire, forge, life. Kale looked to Ira. Then the forge is the first place they'll come. Ravel's 6 eyes gleamed. Exactly. Chapter 25. The Siege of Heaven's Forge. The attack came 3 nights later. It began with whispers, soft, melodic, threading through the marsh like wind through reeds. The villagers woke to see lights moving across the fields, not torches, but floating embers, drifting in formation like fireflies too deliberate to be natural. By dawn, they reached the forge. Each ember carried a face. Some human, some not. They whispered in unison, their voices overlapping in strange harmony. Join the warmth, feed the choir. Ira and Kale stood back to back at the forge door. Ravel prowled before them, claws aglow, his song countering the melody with low, defiant resonance. The embers hissed as they struck the forge walls, leaving trails of frost that burned red. They're feeding on heat, Kale shouted. Ravel's voice deepened into thunder. Then give them cold truth. Ira seized her hammer and slammed it onto the anvil. Sparks flew, not yellow, but violet-white, bursting outward in ripples that cut through the air like waves of wind. The embers recoiled, shrieking. Kale raised his sword, its edge catching Ravel's glow. We stand, or the whole realm burns. Then stand! Ira shouted, striking again. 4 hours they held, the hammer, the blade, the song. And when the storm broke, only ashes fell, dissolving before they touched the ground. Chapter 26. The Ember Child. When dawn came, they found something in the ashes. A small figure lay at the forge's base, a child no older than 8, hair white as ash, skin faintly glowing. She breathed shallowly, each exhale scattering sparks. She's alive, Ira whispered. Ravel sniffed the air. Not alive, becoming. The choir condensed itself, sought a vessel. It found one in your fire. Kale crouched beside the child. Can she be saved? Saved? Ravel mused. That depends. She could be voice or silence, flame or frost. Which would you rather teach her? Ira looked down at the girl, so small, so impossibly fragile. If she carries the choir's memory, then she deserves a new one. She lifted the child into her arms. We'll teach her to sing differently. Ravel smiled faintly. Then the stars might listen after all. Chapter 27. The Pilgrimage of 3. They left the marsh soon after. The forge could be rebuilt, but the realm needed warning. Rumors spread already of strange fires in the north, and southern seas that glowed at night with whispering light. Ira, Kale, and the Ember Child, whom Ira named Solene, traveled across the kingdom, guided by Ravel's memory and Kale's visions. Along the way, they saw villages shimmering with false warmth, cities asleep in standing snow, forests where even birds sang in harmony too perfect to be natural. The choir spreads fast, Kale muttered one night by the campfire. It spreads through yearning, Ravel's disembodied voice replied from the wind. It feeds on longing for peace. That is its cruelty. It offers what all hearts want, until none remain to want it. Ira watched Solene, who slept beside her. Then we'll teach it real peace. Ravel's voice hummed approval. You sound like him. Who? Aldrich, Ravel said. He once said mercy is the most dangerous weapon of all. Chapter 28. The Shattered Cathedral. Their pilgrimage led them at last to the Cathedral of Dusk, a ruin where the old kings once met the stars. Its spires were cracked, but its glass still shimmered with faint celestial color. Solene walked ahead, bare feet leaving prints of glowing dust. She stopped before the altar, a slab carved with 6 circles. Ravel's voice echoed faintly, though no form appeared. Here is where I first sang to the heavens. Here I can return again. Kale frowned. You mean to leave us? Not leave. Blend. The choir must be met by something of equal resonance. I was made to witness, but now I must answer. Iris shook her head. You'll die. Ravel chuckled softly. I've done that before. Solene stepped forward, eyes glowing amber. I hear them, she whispered. They're coming again. Ravel's presence grew brighter, his form coalescing in light. Then let us sing louder. Chapter 29. The Choir of Ember. It began as a whisper, then a roar. Flames of gold and red poured through the cathedral's windows, forming swirling figures of light that sang in layered tones. The Choir of Ember had arrived in full. Ira and Kale braced, shielding Soline. But the child walked past them, unafraid. Her small hands reached toward the storm of voices. I remember you, she said softly. You wanted warmth. So did I. The choir faltered. Ravel's body shimmered into being beside her, larger than before, for blazing like molten glass. Then show them what warmth truly means. Soline placed her hands on his chest. Ira saw light pour from her palms into Ravel's form. He threw back his head and sang. The song that filled the cathedral was no longer one of war or grief. It was lullaby, forged rhythm, heartbeat, wind in marsh reeds. The choir screamed, then melted into color, scattering upward into a dawn no one had noticed arriving. When it ended, only silence remained, and the faint smell of rain. Chapter 30. The Age of the True Forge. The choir never returned. The world rebuilt again, slower this time, wiser. The Forge of Heaven became a temple school, teaching not blacksmiths but singers, keepers of resonance, trained to remember that creation and destruction share the same note. Ira became its first mistress of flame. Kale served beside her until his silver eyes dimmed with peace. Soline grew, neither mortal nor divine, her laughter echoing like chimes. Sometimes, on cold nights, they swore they saw a wolf made of stars pacing the horizon, watching. He never spoke again. He didn't need to, because the world had learned the song. Chapter 31. The Empire of the Cord. 500 years had passed since the last wolf's song soothed the heavens. The world no longer remembered the forge, or the marshes, or the war that almost froze the sky. They remembered the song. What had once been a gift, a melody of creation and peace, was now a system of control. The kingdoms had merged into a single dominion, the Empire of the Cord, ruled not by crown or steel, but by sound. Every city had its spire, a towering instrument that pulsed with controlled resonance. The high cantors claimed their harmonies kept the world stable, that the spires sustained the balance. But everyone knew what happened to those who sang out of tune. Silence. True silence. Whole villages had been hushed for dissonance. In the highest spire of Ardent Vale, where crystal bridges linked towers to the sky, a single voice dared to sing differently. Her name was Lyra Halvin, last descendant of Ira's line, and her voice was wrong in all the right ways. Chapter 32. The Girl Who Sang Backwards. Lyra was 17 and trouble. Born with the same faint violet mark across her palm, she had grown up beneath the shadow of the Vale spire, where cantors taught children to sing the sanctioned hymns of balance. Her voice, however, bent notes sideways, found echoes where none existed, pulled chords apart until new ones formed in defiance. When she sang, lights flickered, mirrors cracked, and something listened. Her tutors called her cursed. Her classmates called her Wolf's Echo. She didn't know why, until the night she dreamt of a forge burning beneath the sea, and a voice of glass and shadow whispered her name. Lyra, the song is no longer yours. She woke to find her room trembling. Every metal surface hummed faintly in harmony with her heartbeat. Chapter 33. The Dissonant Boy. In the undercity below the Vale, where workers tuned the spire's bass resonance, a boy named Kian Narain lived in silence. His bloodline, long forgotten, carried the memory of kings, but now it carried chains. The cantors had forbidden him from speaking, claiming his voice, unbalanced, the spire's song. They fitted a silver collar around his throat that suppressed sound. But Kian had learned to hum without air, through bone and thought. And in those vibrations, he heard something the cantors didn't. A heartbeat buried deep beneath the city. It wasn't the spire. It was older, slower. A rhythm beneath the song. He didn't know it yet, but it was calling to Lyra too. Chapter 34. The Meeting of Echoes. Lyra was fleeing the Veil Guard when she first heard Kian's hum. She'd broken into the forbidden archives of the High Cantor, looking for records of her ancestor Ira Halvern, and found something worse: diagrams of the Spire Resonance Expansion Project, a plan to merge all spires into one song that would silence dissent forever. The guards caught her halfway down the bridge. She leapt, more out of instinct than courage, plummeting into the Undercity's web of suspended iron beams. She landed hard, and found herself face to face with a boy whose eyes glowed faintly silver in the dark. "Who are you?" she gasped. He pointed to his collar. "Couldn't speak." "Then hum if you're friendly." He did. The vibration that rippled through the air was ancient, familiar, like the heartbeat of the world. It resonated against her palm. The violet scarf flared bright. For the first time in centuries, two bloodlines, Halvern and Narration, sang together. And the city listened. Chapter 35: The Return of the Wolf. When the resonance hit the spire's core, something cracked open in the unseen layers of the world. In the skies above Ardent Vale, clouds froze mid-motion. The stars flickered as if blinking awake. And within the echoing caverns below, glass cracked and shimmered. Then came the voice, low, ancient, carrying the warmth of a forge long cold. "Children of the Hinge! You've turned the song into chains." Lyra froze. The world around her bent slightly, light warping as a shape stepped through. A wolf. Transparent, immense, made of constellations and embers. Ravel returned. But his voice was no longer only song, it was grief. "You've forgotten mercy," he said. "And when mercy dies, harmony becomes hunger." Lyra trembled. "You're real?" "Real enough to end this empire, if you force me to." Chapter 36: The Choir of Steel. The High Cantors saw the anomaly as an invasion. They activated the Spire network, merging all resonance towers into a single defense cord, a blade made of sound. The entire sky trembled with their weaponized harmony. Ravel roared, his body flickering between stars and shadow. "They have turned the gift into a curse." Lyra turned to Kian. "Can we counter it?" He touched his collar, eyes burning. Lyra nodded. "Then let's break your chain." She struck the collar with her marked palm. The air cracked with light and sound. The metal shattered, and Kian screamed for the first time in his life. The sound that came out wasn't human. It was the same tone Aldrich had once used to still the stars. Ravel howled, merging his voice with Kian's. Lyra joined in, her melody spiraling between them like a bridge. The spire's weapon faltered, then collapsed into silence so pure it felt like forgiveness. Chapter 37: The Memory of the Forge. After the battle, Ravel led them into the mountains north of the Vale, to ruins buried beneath frost and ash. "This is where the forge once stood," he said, paw prints glowing on the stone. "Here, your ancestors learned that creation and destruction are the same song sung in different keys." Lyra knelt. Beneath the ice, she saw the faint outline of a hammer, fused into the ground. "It's still warm." Ravel nodded. "The forge never dies. It waits for those who remember what it meant to build instead of rule." Kian placed his hand beside hers. The ice melted into a shallow pool that reflected their faces, one marked with violet light, the other silver. Ravel's 6 eyes softened. "The world is ready for a new harmony. But it must be born from silence." Lyra frowned. "Silence?" "True silence," Ravel said. "Not absence of sound. The moment before creation begins again." Chapter 38: The Fall of the Spires. They returned to Ardent Vale to find it trembling. Without the Spire network's control, the resonance had turned wild, storms of sound tearing through the streets. Lyra climbed the spire's spiral staircase with Kian beside her, Ravel's luminous form pacing along the walls like a living reflection. At the top, the High Cantor waited. Cloaked in silver threads, his eyes glowed with the same power that had enslaved generations. "You've undone centuries of order," he said. "Without the cord, there will be chaos." Lyra raised her hand. "Without choice, there is no song." She placed her palm on the spire's heart. The violet mark flared, and the tower began to unravel, not explode, not collapse, but unwind, each note fading into silence. The empire fell without war. Just quiet. A return to the pause between breaths. Chapter 39. The Birth of the New Choir. Months passed. Villages rebuilt, but not under banners or hymns. They built small forges again, tuned by those who listened rather than commanded. The word cantor was reclaimed, no longer a title of power, but of service. Lyra and Kian founded the Order of True Song, teaching that harmony comes not from unison, but from shared difference. Ravel watched from the edge of the world, fading more with each sunset. One night, Lyra asked, "Will we see you again?" He smiled with all 6 eyes. "Every time you forgive someone who doesn't deserve it." Then, with a shimmer of starlight, he vanished once more into the wind. Chapter 40. The Forge Eternal. Years later, when the world was quiet and the sky full of gentle comets, a new forge was lit atop the ruins of the first. Lyra, her hair now streaked with gray, stood beside her children. They sang not to gods, nor kings, but to each other. The fire answered. And far beyond, among constellations no one had named yet, 6 eyes opened briefly, watching, proud, patient. The wolf that remembered smiled once more. The song endured. But this time, it belonged to everyone. End of Book 3. The Choir's Return.